I am here today talking to the writer of The Vanishing Half, The Mothers, Brit Bennett, those are works she's most well known for, I should say. I just want to talk to you to give the world an opportunity to chat with the person behind these books. You know, someone I love. So, our cousins. We'll get into that later. But I just want to focus on the actual writer, the person, not so much the book everyone is talking about, because I think that's important for people to know who you are, who Brit Bennett is, where she comes from, all those great things. So you've done The Mothers, you've done The Vanishing Half, you've done multiple essays before that. Some people may or may not know a lot of your previous works, but I remember you were always like, Kayla, I'm working on this essay and I have that essay going on, especially when you were in grad school. And everything worked up to this moment. So, where does that inspiration come from? The fire that you get to write all of these great works, you know? You're an excellent writer.
Oh,
Where does it come from?
well, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I don't know. I think for me, it's just I try to write towards what I'm curious about in the world. I try to write towards what interests me. I try to write towards questions and not answers. And I think that that's the biggest thing. I never know what I'm going to be curious about. But whether it's nonfiction or these novels, for me, it really is just exploring something that I want to know and want to understand better about the world.
Interesting. So, The Vanishing Half, right here. So, I have a question about this book. Like I said, the whole interview is about this book, but I have a question about it. Why did you choose to release? Because I know as a writer, there's many works that all of us have that are sitting somewhere or whatnot. Why did you choose to release this piece now? Why now, 2020?
Well, it wasn't the timing is was something that kind of just happened outside of my hands, really, because I'd been working on the book for 4 or 5 years, and it happened to be kind of finishing up, and I knew that it was going to come out in 2020. Of course, I had no idea of what the larger context surrounding the book would be it the pandemic or be it the protests that happened last summer. So all of that just kind of crept up on me in this way that was out of my hands. But I knew it was the book that I wanted to write next after The Mothers. I knew I wanted to write a book that was going to be a different book. It's a multi-generational sort of family story. It's a bigger book in a lot of ways. So I knew that I wanted to tackle a different project and kind of challenge myself in a different way after my first book.
Gotcha. Now you have all of this successful content, written. What is your favorite piece of work that you've released? Or is there a favorite piece that you've released, or have we seen that yet?
It's hard to say, I think, because I'm critical of myself and critical of everything that I've done. I think the things that I've really enjoyed some of the nonfiction I've written. I wrote an essay about American Girl dolls and the Addie doll and what my complicated feelings about that doll as a child. And I really had fun writing that and kind of diving into the history of dolls and race in America. So I enjoyed that for sure.
Mhm.
And I also, every book has challenged me in a different way. Every book has required something different of me. So I think the process of writing both of those books and moving on to whatever I'm working on now, I enjoy all of it. I think if you don't enjoy the process of doing it, there's some writers that hate writing, and I wouldn't do it if I hated it. I genuinely take deep joy in the process of writing, so I'm glad that this is what I get to do for a living.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, as your cousin, I do remember, you're an excellent writer. I think you are, of course, a better writer than me. It's funny when I'm in the journals. I remember you. This is just a personal piece. I can remember you. I think I was 18 at the time, and we were all writing like personal statements. And you had gotten into Stanford, and I was like, "Girl, I need help. Like, help me like edit my personal statement." And you took that personal statement, and I think I'm a person that goes on and on and on forever. And you're a person that knows how to just hit these key points and bring it home really well. And I can remember you consolidated my personal statement from like 10 pages to like a page and a half. And I was like, where did it go? You're like, no, you don't need that. Just hit this major point, hit that. Is that something that you continue to do in your writing
I
now?
think so. Yeah, I think so much of revising is, there's a part of the process for me that is about expanding. It's about the work getting bigger and kind of getting deeper into the characters and trying to kind of build it out and make it bigger. And then the next part of that is tightening it. And I think that that's, half the battle is being concise, not repeating yourself, all of those things that kind of get in the way of the experience of reading something. So I think both of those are important parts of the process that kind of pop up at different times. But I do think that that knowing what to leave out is as important, if not more important, than knowing what to include.
And how do you know when it's time to leave something out? Because I have a problem with that. You already know. Leaving.
um, it's hard, you know. I wish I had like a simple answer for that. For me, sometimes I ask myself, am I saying this? I think sometimes there can be a tendency to. I had a professor who called this multiple choice writing, and it's when you say something three different ways, but you're saying the exact same thing three different times.
Mhm,
And I think to me, when I'm doing that, it's because I'm not sure of the right way to say it, or I'm not exactly sure. So I kind of throwing anything at the wall to see what sticks. So
mhm.
when I noticed myself doing that, I realized, okay, there's one example that would be most specific, most interesting. I don't need three examples that are saying the same thing. So I think part of it is that, but I think a lot of it really for me is trial and error and relying on the wisdom of my friends who are really great writers and editors and my editor, asking them to kind of help save me from myself from time to time.
Mhm. Now, your mother has said something to me in the past I remember about you. That was awesome.
Uh,
And so she says that when you hear music, you can see color. Is that true? And how is
yeah.
like how does that come to be? I thought that was profound when she told me that. You know, my
I
grandma's
mean, it's
house or something, and she was like, you know, Brit, when she I was like, oh my God.
I mean, it is true, and it's something that is not, it's not, I don't know how common it is, but it's not uncommon. I know like Kanye is somebody who experiences that. There are, it's sort of an overlap of your senses in a way. And it is, I think culturally we associate it with people who are artists. I don't know that there's a connection between those things, but I do think
I don't know.
that I
This is
have.
great.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, but I for me, there is like the sort of sensory experience of language or music, all of those things. That is something that I thought, I don't know that I thought it was uncommon until I went to college and I was talking to my roommate and she was like, wait, what? And I thought this was something that everybody experienced when they listen to music and realized that that was not true. So yeah, it is part of how I experience music. It's funny that my mom brought that
Yeah, your mom, you know, she speaks highly of you guys. So,
up.
is that why the book covers are always like full of color, or is that anything? Is there a connection there?
There is no connection. I just got very lucky that the designers for my book jackets, we're both two different designers, but they're both very talented. And they chose book covers that are really striking and memorable and look good on Instagram and all of those things that book designers are thinking about nowadays. I just got very lucky that I ended up with two really beautiful covers.
Nice, nice. Now I have another question about this book. So, in the book, you know, there's many different topics. Some of the most common things I noticed in a lot of interviews people are talking about with you is colorism, which is pretty relevant from the beginning. But what I want to ask you is there's a lot of women making tough decisions that are being objectified by society and having to make tough choices because of how society will see them, depending on those choices they make. Do you find yourself having to be or being objectified by society or making certain choices based off of how people will see you or objectify you as a woman?
I mean, I don't know, I don't know about sort of being objectified, but I think that I'm really interested in general in stories about women who are making tough decisions and stories about women who are struggling to create themselves, who are charting sort of paths for themselves, against cultures that don't always allow that freedom of choice. My first book was about that. It was about a girl who makes a really big choice in her life. She chooses to terminate a pregnancy, and go to college instead of staying to become a teenage mother. And the rest of the book kind of follows the aftermath of that decision in her life. And then the Vanishing Half is about these twins who set off in different directions and make very different choices. So I think in general, I like stories about women that are making bold decisions because often in fiction and often in real life, women who make bold decisions are punished. So I don't want to punish characters for doing that. I want to just think about what it means for them to kind of make themselves in a world that does not really allow that in a lot of different ways.
A lot of different family dynamics in your book. Some I see even in my own family. I'm not I'm in your family. But just dealing with family dynamic, did you find some type of inspiration from history in your family? Sometimes that's where I get inspired from. So,
Yeah. I think a bit. My mom's from Louisiana, and that's where the Vanishing Half kind of opens.
mhm,
My mom and her sister made their way from Louisiana to California, where she met my dad, and part of the book is set in California. And my dad grew up in LA, and we eventually end up in LA around the same time period that he would have been sort of a teenager, young adult. So I definitely drew on some of these threads of my family history and thinking about the setting and the time period and some of the sort of contours of those relationships. So I don't think of the book as being autobiographical, but I do think it draws on different elements of my family history for sure.
that's nice. But your family history, which some of it is my family history too. It's interesting because it's a commonality that a lot of Black Americans have dealt with. Moving even from where they were historically, Arkansas on your dad's side is where I'm from. Where our family connection comes from, to California, which was seen as like the promised land. Back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, things like that. The Great Migration, I think, is what they call it. Um, in that, do you think that in these books you're kind of taking people on a journey to discover their purpose? Um, is that what it
I mean,
is? Like we were just saying, like Chris was saying, hey, you helped me get through this and find my
yeah.
do that.
I mean, I'm touched when people tell me that. I don't know that I ever imagined that something I'm writing could do that. I'm always kind of surprised and moved when people connect to the book in some deeper way. I think particularly now during this pandemic, there have been so many readers I've talked to who have said, this book helped me get through my quarantine, which is so dark, but it's a nice thing to hear that the book kept people company in what has been such a difficult time for everybody. So I don't know that I set out to do it. I don't know that you can do something like that if you attempt to do it. But it is always, I think, surprising to me in a nice way to hear that people have connected emotionally to something that I imagined and something that came out of my imagination.
Nice, nice. Let's talk a little bit about family. Just a little, just a little bit. I found some fun photos of us and a few more later when I get a chance. But this one I've always already had, just
uh,
out. I think we were like really young. I know people can see the computer, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you, that's me, that's your
Yeah,
sister. Can't remember who this is, but it's
yeah,
like
it's
just
my friend. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I'll try to see if I can like put it up on screen when we edit or something, but
Okay.
keep this special to me. But anyways, so you are one of three girls. My mom found this photo and was like, "Oh, I love this." So this is you guys on the camera. You remember?
I
I don't
don't
know.
know that I've ever seen that picture. I don't think I've ever seen
Yeah,
it.
that's your mom,
Yeah,
and for
my
those,
mom. Yeah.
that's her mom, and those are her two sisters. And do you
Yes.
find inspiration from your family when it comes to growing up in a house of three girls? Like, how do they inspire you? Because you guys are all so different, right? And what you
Yes.
pop into, what you like
Yes.
to do for fun.
I think so. And I think for me I think the biggest thing I've taken away from that is just, I grew up, as you said, in a household of mostly women. And I think that that's one, I mean, I think that's one reason why I'm so interested in the stories of girls and women, because that is kind of the space in which I grew up. That was like the common thread of experience. So I think there's one element of that, but I also think I grew up in a household where I was always encouraged to speak my mind by my father. He never has any kind of machismo, I'm the man of the house, you have to listen to me type of thing. So I think I grew up in a space where I was always encouraged to say what I believe, to speak my mind. And that's not an experience that all girls and women experience, this feeling that you have to kind of make yourself small. I never felt that way. So I think that that is something that has prepared me in a way for to figure out what I think about things, to speak up in class, to now do what I do for a living, which is putting my thoughts and opinions and beliefs into the world. That's something that I think is you have to kind of cultivate a type of, I mean, maybe ego, maybe confidence in order to do something like that. So I think that growing up in the house that I grew up in, where I was encouraged to explore expressing myself as a young woman, I think was something that I consider kind of foundational to my life and also my career.
Now, I will agree with you on that, that our family dynamic was definitely like that. I know that I didn't even explain to people, but for people that don't know, so your grandmother, my grandfather were brother and sister, and so we both got that dynamic. I carry the last name of her grandmother. And one thing your grandmother used to say to me, God bless her, she's no longer with us. I never got to meet my grandfather, so I grew close to your grandmother on that side. She used to say, um, do the best you can do. Give it your all. We've already worked hard for you to have these opportunities. And so I do think that you definitely come from a family like that. I come from a family like that where just reach your goals, hit
Mhm.
everything that you want to hit, make sure you achieve and whatnot. So what would you say to writers and the LGBTQ plus community? What would you say to young Black women, people of color, women? What would you say to them when they're not able to be in a space that we grew up in? What would you say?
Yeah.
Which how should they look for their inspiration? How should they keep pressing forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because it is such a privilege to grow up in a place and in a community that supports you. Like you said, everybody doesn't have that. So I think that the best thing I think now is that we have these kind of glimpses into the lives of the people who have come before us, the writers that you admire, the people that you read. You can see writers who have charted a path for themselves under these unforgiving circumstances, and you see the ways in which they've created these careers. You see those examples before you. So I think that people have always done that. You draw on the strength of these people who come before you, even if they are not people that you personally know. They can be writers or artists that you admire from afar. But I think ultimately, I think, yeah, everyone deserves families and friends and communities that support them who they are and supports what they want to do with their lives. It's unfortunate that everybody doesn't have that, but I think maybe the next best thing is being able to draw on books and films and music and whatever else inspires you in order to make the type of work that you want to make.
So, who is Brit going to be in the next 5, 10 years? What can we see? What can we expect? I know you have a movie deal that's out there already that's been circulating, I believe with HBO or something. I was reading. What do we see next? Do we see the Oscars? Do we see more? Are you the next Shonda Rhimes? What do we see next?
I don't know. I don't know who I'm going to be in the next year. I think that for me, I have lots of different things that I'm thinking about of what I want to pursue next. I haven't really decided on anything. But I think for me, it always comes back to storytelling, and it comes back to the fact that that's what I want to do with my life. I want to tell stories about interesting characters, and whether that whatever form that takes, that's kind of I think up to be determined. But for now, I just want to focus on continuing to grow as a writer and continuing to explore the creative worlds that I'm interested in exploring.
Nice. And I do have one more question. Do you think that, because I remember this, and I know that a lot of times we were raised to read a lot, and you definitely read a lot. I remember you in reading Addie, and you were talking about all the American Doll books. I don't know if anybody remembers those, but do you think that that has helped create and build you as a writer, as an author, or do you think that had you've never really read, they say knowledge, all the knowledge you need is in books. Do you think that you would have been Brit Bennett?
No, I would not have been. I think that I think in general reading is so important because every time I have a thought that I feel is original, it's like it's not original. Somebody else has thought that. Somebody else has been thinking through what you are thinking through. And to me, there's something so comforting about that to think that I can read a book that was written 50 years ago and those people were worried about the same things that we are worried about now. So I think that there's something really important about reading for me, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, whether I'm reading to gain some type of information or whether I'm just reading to experience a story about people who are different from me. I think that that is just sort of crucial to being a person. But then I think, especially as a writer, reading is how you learn how to write. I would not have known how to write a novel unless I had read novels. And I'm still constantly in the process of learning again. Every time I'm reading a new book, I learn something different about writing novels, and I learn something that I want to integrate to the next book that I'm going to write. So definitely would not have made it where I made it without reading. I think that has always been my first love before I ever became a writer. I think that's what I always go back to at my
Nice. Knowledge is power, you guys.
core.
Well, Britt, thank you so much for talking to me, clarifying things, giving people an opportunity to get to know you, where you come from, not just from reading it. I know I've seen you in all kinds of vlogs, blogs. She's from this and she's done that. And okay. I was like, I don't know if she officially did that interview, but that sounds great. It's missing a few things. So I just wanted to chat with you, make it a little personal. I love the work that you're doing, of course. And every time you tell me you have an essay or something, I'm like, great, let's look at this and read it. So I'm blessed to be able to have that inside scoop sometimes of what's coming up next. So you
Thank
always have my support, cousin. I'm
I
always
appreciate it.
there for you. Love you so much. Thank you
Thank
so much for
you.
spending some time with me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.